welcome back to Your Brain on Science. This is Alaina and Zarmeen together in the same room
Finally.
at the same time, here to talk to you about all things LSD.
Yes, we are so happy to be together again and recording content for you all. This is the first episode in a 4-episode special little mini series to celebrate Bicycle Day tomorrow. Woohoo! So let's get right into it.
Yeah. So we'll kick it off simple, right? So we're doing a quick and dirty on LSD. So lysergic acid diethylamide, a laboratory synthesized complex tryptamine. It's pretty similar to ergoline, which is a ergot alkaloid. And so there's a lot of ergoline derivatives that exist in the world. And some of them are actually used clinically. So for the purpose of vasoconstriction, and for the treatment of migraine, if used with caffeine, and also even for Parkinson's disease. Yeah, and then some are also implicated in the disease ergotism, which was pretty prominent in what was it? Like before we had modern civilization, people would eat bread and then they would get
ergotism. Okay, so do you guys remember all of like the Salem witch trials, like the sort of the big stuff that happened? You know, girls were claiming that other girls were witches and whatnot, and it's theorized and it's hypothesized that the people in that town had actually been consuming bread that was infected with, that had like growth of ergot on them. So they were eating this bread and they were like literally having these hallucinations that Mary Beth down the street just turned into a bat and flew away. And maybe they really were, but like poor Mary Beth wasn't actually a witch. So fun little story.
Fun fact. So that being said, right?
Yeah.
What is LSD most known for? Being a classic psychedelic, right? It has this unique and promiscuous pharmacological profile. So obviously it produces hallucinations due to one of its isomers, the D isomer, that acts on the serotonin 2A receptor. And if you don't know what an isomer is, it's basically just the nature of the chemical composition that causes it to move around in the 3D space, so it can bind in different ways. So this D isomer basically is the one that binds the serotonin 2A receptor, causing these hallucinations in people. LSD acts at other serotonin receptors as well, including serotonin 2B receptor, which is found in cardiac tissue, and also non-serotonergic receptors like several dopamine receptors, and a couple other fun ones. But LSD is more than just a serotonergic hallucinogen, right? It's got a rich social history, like you just mentioned, all leading back to the Salem witch trials.
Yes, yeah. So LSD, it's talking about Bicycle Day. Albert Hofmann.
Yes.
Albert Hofmann discovered the psychedelic effects of LSD in the 1950s. And this was following an accidental exposure to LSD. Hofmann had returned to the compound, and he took it deliberately after having been exposed to it accidentally.
On April 19th.
On April 19th.
Bicycle Day.
Bicycle Day. And he recorded his experiences. He found the experience to be intense, describing this kaleidoscopic, this is a direct quote, kaleidoscopic, fantastic images. And, you know, this is a lot of the imagery that we see canonically associated with LSD use. And once the structure of serotonin was reported, it was put forth that this neurotransmitter could be implicated in several neuropsychiatric diseases, since LSD contains a tryptamine core scaffolding, just like the endogenous ligand serotonin or 5-HT.
Yeah, so that kind of speaks to, like, you know, the similarity between serotonin itself and LSD and why it binds to these receptors, causing these crazy images, right?
So this also sort of harkens back to, if you guys listen to the episode with me and Haley, the big like the psychedelics being psychomimetics, right? Like or mimicking some like neuropsychiatric symptomology, right? Like acute psychiatric malaise, I think. Yeah. As Alaina chokes to death.
Excuse me.
So eventually, in the 1960s, LSD was now being synthesized by several clandestine chemists. including some notable names like Stanley Owsley, I hope I'm saying that correctly, and Tim Scully. Eventually, the LSD was brought into the counterculture, very anti-government. This was anti-war,
Anti-Vietnam.
It was very peace
Women's
and love.
rights.
Yeah. So it was being used for, anti-war protests, and it really infiltrated the music scene. Grateful Dead, and we've heard of all the acid tests. We I think one of our first episodes was talking about that.
Yeah, we have a blog post about kind of the social aspects of psychedelics.
Yeah,
on our website.
And it was actually, I'm so sorry, that was so gross. I'm gonna cut that out.
Drinking your coldness.
I was gonna go into a coughing fit with Leary, and I was like, we are not editing this. So I drank coffee, and I was like, oh my God, like dying inside. Okay, we're gonna go back to this. Okay.
What is wrong with both of us right now?
Literally, what the fuck? Okay. LSD also infiltrated the academic scene, and this was in part due to notables like Kenny Kesey, Timothy Leary, who we know very well, and the Grateful Dead. And I just brought them up, in terms of the music scene, but I think they were like vital in getting LSD out and sort of spread into society and exposing a lot of people to it that could now have access to it and make, ask these questions and go so on and so forth.
Yeah. And with, this widespread use, unfortunately, at the height of it, and after some interestingly failed military experiments, which we will not get into today, the U.S. government determined it was a danger to society, and thus the drug war has begun. The Controlled Substances Act was passed in the early 1970s, right? 1971.
71.
Yeah.
70.
70 and 71, but yeah. And the drug classification system had started. So interestingly, we just looked this up for this episode. LSD is actually one of the first drugs to be scheduled ever.
Crazy. Along with DMT.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And also, we just did a quick search, so please correct us if we're wrong, but that is what we could find. This made recreational use very illegal. It also made it extremely difficult for LSD research to continue in the United States.
Yeah. LSD continued to be used in the underground, though. People are gonna do what they're gonna do, right? And you can do whatever you want, and this can be and current women's reproductive rights arguments, right? People are going to do what they're going to do, despite all of the sanctions that you put on things, despite all of the laws. So LSD continued to be used in the underground and was very well known and characterized for its like remarkable, crazy, fantastical almost effects. Mm-hmm. And these include changes in perception, sensory processing, and induced these intense, really, really intense, and intense in the positive way or intense in the negative way experiences in a lot of people, spiritual, maybe even religious experiences. Mm-hmm. But the effect of orally or sublingually administered LSD, so on the tongue, under the tongue, can last between 6 to 12 hours, depending on the dose, depending on how the individual metabolizes the dose, but 6 to 12 hours generally, right? Mm-hmm. And the dose is usually 100 to 250 micrograms, okay? Mm-hmm. All you need is micrograms. This drug is extremely potent, so micrograms. The use of LSD has been noted to be for recreational, spiritual, and many social reasons, right? It's very often taken with friends in nature to instill maybe an appreciation for the unknown and for life in general. And for a lot of people, LSD, and especially, back then when it was part of this counterculture, was something to help facilitate feelings of peace or love during war times, right? Or promote oneness. So like tuning in, dropping out, but all together.
Yeah.
Right.
So tuning into that self, right? But dropping out of the society that people are having to unfortunately experience.
Yeah. Unfortunately experience society. It's rough. No, but yeah.
So LSD, right, is probably one of the most characterized psychedelics, right, when it comes to subjective effects.
For sure.
So
It was, one of the first psychedelic drugs to be actually investigated therapeutically in the 1950s. And today, interestingly, we don't see LSD being used in very many, like in clinical studies. I think right now, psilocybin is really predominating the space. And, that's not saying, yeah. And that's not saying that LSD isn't being used at all. No, of course it is. We're seeing a lot of work come out
a
with
lot of
LSD.
microdosing with LSD, but
Yes.
nothing that is like
Not really huge clinical
popular
trials with like psychedelic assisted psychotherapy paradigms. It's usually psychedelic assisted psychotherapy with psilocybin.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's for a lot of reasons. One being some of the hallmark watershed studies that came out, the Griffiths paper way back when, 2016, way back
Feels
when.
like way back.
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
like almost 15. That's crazy. That's crazy. Okay.
I'm having a moment. Yeah, okay. So whatever. In long ago in antiquity, that paper came out. That was, looking at the effects of psilocybin. So sometimes it's easier when you have had some clinical success with a drug to sort of move on with that. But I don't know. I think it might also just be personal preference at this point. Because,
well, and I think too, what we just talked about, like the history of LSD, there's a lot of baggage that comes with LSD.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of those like earlier studies, right, they were not done very ethically, or the people who are conducting them were also on LSD.
Yeah.
So I think like a lot of the not use of it nowadays might come from the mistrust in the LSD studies, or from it being less likely to be funded due to the governmental history with LSD specifically. That's my thoughts on it.
Yeah, but it is being used,
it's not like it's not there at all.
Yeah, for sure. So it's available, but there's a lot to learn. So from a research standpoint, like very like basics, I think biology, neuroscience, medicine, there is a lot that we can learn about LSD. Recently, actually, it was discovered. Yeah, it was discovered how LSD binds to the receptor actually causes a lid almost to form, right? Trapping the compound and potentially being responsible for the longevity of those effects.
Mm-hmm. So that's just like one example about how we're still learning and we're still trying to figure out exactly what these drugs are doing in our brains and how they're causing this just overhaul of all the senses, right?
Yeah.
So we know it's a serotonin 2A receptor, but what is this doing globally to the brain? It's something that's really currently popular to research. There's also some research focusing on, LSD's effects on other receptors. Like I mentioned, it's implicated in some cardiovascular stuff. And it also has a role in being used to potentially treat eating disorders through the serotonin dopamine modulation of like hunger, as well as potentially being looked at for various drug addictions. So
yeah,
that is something that is currently ongoing that we are still learning about.
So these are a lot of positive associations, and even the subjective experience of LSD itself. A lot of people, we just talked about the peace and love era, right? Like listening to the Grateful Dead. That's what a lot of people associate LSD use with. But Alaina and I are big proponents of this, of talking about this. It's very important to note that not every trip is going to be a good one, right? Like always, there are risks associated with psychedelic use, including things like paranoia, dissociation, persisting visual hallucinations, right? And acute anxiety. So as always, I think make sure you know what you're taking and always have an awareness of set and setting. Please go listen to our harm reduction episode.
Yes.
And also, when talking about psychedelics, when touting, the benefits of psychedelics, the therapeutic benefit of psychedelics, or maybe the capacity that we want to harness, I think always, always, always keep a very realistic view. These are amazing substances, but they're not amazing for everyone. And maybe they're amazing for you one day, maybe they won't be amazing for you the next day. Yeah. Exactly. So you have to recognize all of that, right? And I think it's such a disservice to not, and we have a responsibility to, I think. So
exactly. Yeah. Couldn't have said it better myself. Well, we hope you liked our quick and dirty episode on LSD. Obviously, there's 100 million things that we could talk about with this, but we just wanted to bring you like a short episode to introduce this week. We've got a lot of awesome, amazing, all capital letters, stuff this week. Like, tune in tomorrow. So we have an episode with the one and only Leonard Pickett. Redoing that. So tune in tomorrow for our episode with the one and only Leonard Picard as he talks about his experiences and his life in the psychedelic scene and also in prison. And he talks with us about his current book that he wrote in prison. So
Yeah.
make sure you're liking, subscribing, sharing, checking out all of our stuff, including some fun upcoming stuff.
Ooh, like our new YouTube channel for a video of this episode. So if you guys are listening to us drone on, you can also watch us do it.
You get to see us stare at each other and stare into space and look completely ridiculous.
Oh yeah, I promise it's worth it though. Please go to youtube.com/yourbrainonscience and check out more content on our website, psychedelicbrainscience.com, and our brand new Patreon. So we are launching our Patreon, and it's patreon.com/yourbrainonscience, and we have a few different tiers for you guys to check out. So please go look at that, explore it,
give us feedback,
chat with us. We'd love to hear from you. And if you guys like this episode and you want something maybe a little bit more in depth about LSD, we can also do that. But,
yeah,
you know, we'll do anything for you guys.